Chapter 8. When the knocking began, Elder Thomas thought he had overslept, but the room was dark and he realized that it was still early. He grabbed his robe and hurried to the door. He was surprised to see Peter Stoltz standing there, wide-eyed, his hair ruffled as though he had just gotten out of bed. "Anna is very sick," he insisted. "Can you come? Mama wants you." Yes, come in for a moment." "No, I'll start back on my bicycle. Come as quickly as you can." Elder Sawyer was already getting out of bed. Both elders dressed quickly, saying very little to each other. But in the courtyard, when they were getting their bikes, Elder Sawyer said, "Do they understand about administering? Is that what they want?" "Yes, I think so. I told them about it." The elders pumped hard. They left their bicycles in front of the Stoltz's building and they hurried up the stairs. When they reached the landing, Peter was standing in the doorway. "Come in," he said. He walked on through the living room to a hall and then stopped by a door and motioned the elders in. Inside, the room was lighted dimly by a single lamp in the corner. Frau Stoltz had been sitting by the bed. She stood up, still holding a basin and a washcloth. "Thank you," she said. "What's wrong?" "Influenza." Elder Thomas heard the despair in Frau Stoltz's voice. "How bad is she?" "Not good. Not good at all. The doctor comes every day, but now he says we can only wait and see. Her fever is very high." Elder Thomas stepped closer to the bed, and he was astounded by what he saw. Anna's eyes were sunken, her face skeletal and white. Frau Stoltz had been wiping Anna's face with a damp cloth, and her hair was matted. She seemed to have no substance, as though she were as thin as the sheet over her. She was dying, Elder Thomas realized, and he felt a sudden panic. "She was talking to us until last night, but now she is sinking." Frau Stoltz began to cry. "Will you bless her? Can you bring her back?" Elder Thomas had only administered to one other person in his life. No one had ever asked him to bring someone back from the edge of death. "We do have the power," he said, frightened to make a promise. He reached into his pocket and grasped the little bottle of oil. "Where is Herr Stoltz?" he asked. "He doesn't believe in this. He wants nothing to do with it. He's very angry right now, Bruder Thomas. He can't bear this. I don't know what he'll do." Elder Thomas could feel the weight. He wished he had his father with him, or an apostle, someone with deeper faith, greater power. "Frau Stoltz," he said, "I need to be ready. I want to pray. Could I go into the living room for a moment?" "Of course, go ahead, but don't take too long." Elder Thomas looked at his companion. "Come with me," he said, and the two walked to the living room. So the elders knelt together, and Elder Thomas prayed. "Father in heaven," he said, "I'm scared. I'm not big enough for this." And then he explained that the Stoltzes were honest and good, and they were worthy of such a blessing. "Please, Father, don't let my weakness stand in their way. Trust in Frau Stoltz's faith more than in mine or Elder Sawyer's." Elder Thomas's voice came close to pinching off. "I've never been asked to do anything so important as this, Lord. I trust in Thee to put the right words in my mouth, that I may speak Thy words, not mine." When Elder Thomas got up from his knees, he was feeling better, but he was still scared. He looked at his companion. "It'll be all right," Elder Sawyer said. Elder Thomas wiped the tears from his cheeks. He took a breath. He wanted to walk back into that bedroom with some confidence, but his thoughts were running fast. What if he blessed her to live and she died? What would Herr Stoltz say? "You anoint her, okay?" Elder Thomas told his companion. "Just do it in English." When the two returned to Anna's bedroom, Elder Thomas nodded to Frau Stoltz to assure her, but he could feel his hands shake as he handed the vial of oil to Elder Sawyer. "What's Anna's full name?" he asked Frau Stoltz. "Anna Eleonora Stoltz." Frau Stoltz was grasping her hands together, her fingers tightly laced. "What should I do?" "You and Peter just stand here close. Listen to the blessing. Pray with us. Add your faith to ours." Peter nodded and stepped close. His eyes were wide, almost frantic. Elder Thomas touched his companion's shoulder, and Elder Sawyer stepped forward. He leaned over and let a little drop of oil fall onto Anna's forehead, at the hairline, and then he turned and handed the bottle and the lid to Elder Thomas. It all seemed rather awkward, but Elder Sawyer did say the prayer all right, and then Elder Thomas stepped closer to join him. Anna's bed was low, and the elders had to bend down and reach rather far to place their hands on her head. Elder Thomas felt the heat in her head, heard her take a longer breath, as if in response to the touch, and then he felt something else. As he shut his eyes, he felt his chest swell and fill with calm. All the shaking stopped, and he knew. The words were easy. He sealed the anointing, and then he said, "Anna, you have important reasons to stay upon this earth. We command you in the name of the Lord to be restored to your full health and well-being. Return to us and be healed." Later, he would try to remember what he had said. But what he would remember more than anything was the feeling that had come over him, the overwhelming love he felt for the Lord, for Anna and her family, and the light that seemed to fill him up. When he ended the prayer, he turned to Frau Stolz, who was crying audibly. She grasped Elder Thomas around the shoulders and pressed her head against his chest. "Will it be so?" she said. "Can it really happen this way?" And instantly Elder Thomas felt the first doubt. A moment before he hadn't questioned at all, he had known. But Frau Stolz seemed unsure, and when he looked at Anna, she seemed unchanged. Her breath was imperceptible. She seemed gone already, the same as when the elders had entered the room. It was Elder Sawyer who said, "She is fine. I know it." That was the best Elder Sawyer could do with his German, but Elder Thomas felt another surge of confidence. He patted Frau Stolz on the shoulder and said, "Trust in the Lord." As the elders left the room and turned down the hall, they could see into the kitchen where Herr Stolz was sitting at the table. When he heard the elders coming, he looked up. "This was my wife's desire. I want you to leave now and not come back." And it was that voice that Elder Thomas remembered as he and Elder Sawyer bicycled back to their apartment. He had seen nothing but light for that minute or so during the blessing, but now what he felt was darkness in Herr Stolz's angry eyes and the desperation in Frau Stolz's. It was a hard morning. Elder Sawyer kept reassuring Elder Thomas. The Spirit had told him the words were right. Anna was going to recover. Elder Thomas envied Elder Sawyer's faith. He tried to be as strong, but he was already trying to think how he could console the Stolzes, explain what had happened if the blessing wasn't granted. And that only led to the worst thought of all, a world without Anna. When the elders ended their tracting, they rode their bicycles back to their apartment. As they coasted to a stop, Elder Thomas saw a man standing near the front door. Then he realized it was Herr Stolz. Elder Thomas hated to think what he was about to hear. The idea crossed his mind that Herr Stolz was there to curse them, to tell them that their blessing had only given his wife false hope before the end. Elder Thomas stepped off his bike and hoisted it over the curb. Then he set it down and walked straight to Herr Stolz. It was only when he got close that he saw the calm in the man's face. "How is she?" Elder Thomas finally dared to ask. "I came to tell you. After you left, only a short time after, the fever left her. She is getting better. She is sitting up now. She had a little to eat." All the agony suddenly released in Elder Thomas, and a sob broke from his chest. "Thank God," he said, forgetting to speak German. Elder Sawyer came up behind him and put his arm around his companion's shoulder. "She's all right," Elder Thomas told him, feeling something much more powerful than he had expected. Herr Stolz didn't speak for a long time, but when Elder Thomas had gotten out his handkerchief and had managed to clear his own eyes enough to see again, he saw that tears were in Herr Stolz's eyes too. "I don't know what this means. I cannot say for sure that your blessing made any difference. It might have happened anyway." But he sounded humbled. "Herr Stolz, I am never very sure about such things myself," Elder Thomas said, "but I want you to know this. When I put my hands on her head, the Lord filled me with truth. I felt it. I knew she was all right. It's that simple for you?" Elder Thomas wanted to say yes, but he told the truth. "No. After I left your house, I doubted myself. I thought maybe I had only felt what I wanted to feel. I've been worried all morning. So which is it?" "The blessing was a miracle, Herr Stolz. I'm sure it was. Believe that, and don't let my weakness cause you to doubt." Herr Stolz ran his hand across his cheek and quickly flicked away the tears that had dropped onto his cheekbones. "Bruder Thomas, you are a remarkable young man. You trust, you believe, but you don't lie to me. Your honesty means much to me. It makes me think you really did feel something from God." "I did, Herr Stolz. I would like to believe in miracles, Bruder Thomas. I can't say that I do, but I am thankful to you, and I'm sorry for the way I treated you at my house." "You were scared," Elder Thomas said. "Yes, I was." But he had said all he could say. The tears were streaming down his cheeks. Elder Thomas wanted to wrap his arms around the man, but Herr Stolz was still a little too formal for that. Herr Stolz said, "Anna wants you to come back." "Yes, we can come. I'll take the streetcar back. You go ahead on your bicycles. You will get there before I do." "I'm sure my wife will feed you," Herr Stolz said. "She'll want to feed you every day from now on." Elder Thomas thought he knew what that meant, but he decided not to ask. All that would take care of itself. Herr Stoltz seemed to see the question in his eyes, however, and he answered, "I regret what I told you before. You may come to us. I care not what the Gestapo has to say about that." "Good. We want to keep teaching you, and we would like you to come to church." "Yes, I thought about that on the way over here. I want to attend your church, at least once." Elder Thomas smiled. He had more than one visit in mind. "Good," he said again. "We'll work all that out. We'll see you at your house." He shook Herr Stoltz's hand, and he felt the man pressing back, offering as much affection as he knew how to give. The elders began to walk away when Herr Stoltz said, "Just a moment. Could you do something for me?" "Of course." "Could you say a prayer? I want to be grateful, and yet I'm not sure how I'll feel about all this in the future. It would be more truthful if you said it for me." And so the three walked into the courtyard behind the house where they could be alone, and Elder Thomas prayed. He thanked the Lord for the blessing, and asked a blessing on Herr Stoltz, too, called him Bruder for the first time. "Let him feel thy spirit," Elder Thomas said. "Let him know the truth of what happened today, and the truth of the restored gospel." Herr Stoltz didn't say, "Amen," but he shook Elder Thomas's hand again, grasping it even tighter than before. A short time later, when the elders knocked on the Stoltz's door, Frau Stoltz was the one who answered. She grabbed Elder Thomas immediately, and she clung to him and cried. And then Frau Stoltz motioned for the elders to follow her, and they walked to Anna's bedroom again. She was sitting up with 2 big pillows behind her. She still looked white and delicate. Elder Thomas stepped close and reached out to shake her hand. She took his hand, but she kept it, held it, and Elder Thomas saw something new. Her eyes were alive, but they were quieter than before. "Thank you," she said. "It's all right, I heard your voice. I was very far down, but I heard you call me back." "Really? I didn't think you even knew we were here." "I didn't know. I was leaving. I felt comfortable. I wanted to go, and I was moving towards something good. And then I heard your voice. I knew I had to come back." But Elder Thomas had no idea what to say. "That's good," he finally offered, feeling stupid for not saying something more meaningful. "I feel different," Anna said. "I'm not the same person." "It's all right," her mother said. "It's not a bad change." "I know," was all Anna said. She was looking up at Elder Thomas, and he saw something there that embarrassed him. She was still holding his hand, and finally he thought to pull it away. Chapter 9. Bobby hesitated outside Professor Stinson's office and almost walked away, but she told herself she was being silly, and she tapped on his door. "Yes, come in," she heard him call, and she couldn't help smiling. There was something brash in calling out this way, not bothering to come to the door. She opened the door about halfway and looked in. "I just wanted to ask you a quick question, Professor Stinson." He was seated at his desk, but he let his chair swivel around, and he was already smiling as though he were pleased to have someone, or maybe Bobby, stop by. "Come in, sit down." "Oh, I'm not staying that long," Bobby said. She stepped into the room, but she kept her hand on the doorknob. She had been in the office once before, but again she was amazed by the chaos. Books and papers were stacked everywhere, or perhaps dropped was more accurate. "I'm working on my paper, and I couldn't remember what you said about footnote style," Bobby said. "Is Turabian all right?" Professor Stinson laughed and tossed his hands in the air. "I don't care, just stick something down there." "Oh, some professors are very—" "I know. I always got my footnotes wrong in grad school. But as long as I wrote something brilliant, my professors forgave me." He laughed again with a little boy's kind of elation, his voice putting like a motor. "And I was always brilliant." "You went to Columbia, didn't you?" "For grad school, yes. Amherst undergrad. And my dad's a professor at Yale. You're looking at a thoroughbred. Good genes, good training. The only thing I lack is demeanor." "And footnotes," Bobby said. This set off another surge of laughter, which delighted Bobby. But she was hardly prepared when Professor Stinson stood up, thrust his hands into his pockets, and said, "Bobby, you are absolutely wonderful. Do you know that?" Bobby felt her face turn hot. "I mean it. You're twice as bright as anyone in any of my classes, and you're right with me. Don't you see me directing my lectures to you?" Bobby had certainly noticed, and it sometimes made her uncomfortable, but she kept the eye contact because she loved the amazing range of emotions in his subtle green eyes, and she liked to watch for his smile lurking and then bursting out with joy in a response to a comment, more often than not his own. He was the youngest professor Bobby had taken a class from, and even though he wasn't exactly handsome, she found him, when she admitted the truth to herself, disturbingly attractive. She also knew, just on the edge of her consciousness, that the question about footnotes was more an excuse than a reason for stopping by. "What are you going to do, Bobby? And don't tell me you want to teach high school. You need to teach at a college. It's the only life for someone who likes to think." He motioned at a chair in the corner. "Sit down." Bobby did sit, even though she had told herself she wouldn't stay long. "I'm not sure what I'll do," she said. Professor Stinson sat in his desk chair again. He had already taken off his tweed coat and tossed it on a radiator near his desk. Bobby could see that he had some muscles under his shirt. He hadn't spent all his life reading and thinking. "I saw you showing off your new diamond ring the other day," he said. "It's as big as a baseball." "I wasn't showing it off. Some girls wanted to see it." "Well, in any case, I suppose you're getting married before long. But I hope you don't drop your studies when you do." "All that's a little unclear right now," Bobby said. "But I'm not getting married right away." "I would think not. You're awfully young," and let his eyebrows rise as though shocked. "Well, not really. My grandmother had 2 children by the time she was my age." "That is such a Mormon response," he said. Bobby laughed. "What's it like to come from the East and live here with all us Mormons?" she asked. "Well, I'll tell you." He ran his fingers through his hair. "My first year, 3 years ago, I was baffled. If I'd taken a job on some South Pacific island, I couldn't have been more confused by the culture. But I like it here now. There are things I don't like, but on balance, it's a good place." "What don't you like?" He answered without hesitation. "There's no curiosity in Mormons. They've got all the truth they want, and they're suspicious of any fellow who's been transported across state lines from one of Satan's universities."